Good morning, everybody. I've noticed that there seems to be, I think, at least an occasional, not so much a confusion, but I think it could cause confusion where scripts are being overridden. Like a particular script, let's say Workshop Framework is being overridden, or the Workshop script PEX to be exact, is being overridden by something else. So some features don't work. And in case somebody doesn't know, just as an example, in a compiled script, you define functions that are generally event driven. Now, what Bethesda did is sometimes they gate these functions behind a quest stage. Therefore, until that quest stage is completed, certain things don't happen. So they gate them behind that, a simple check. And that can help to mitigate or deal with stack frames happening on, being executed in literally any order, basically in absolutely any order. Let me check this real quick. Yeah, we're good. So by gating them behind a variable such as a quest stage, you can literally make sure that code doesn't get executed. But then you have another problem. The problem is how do you, when a certain quest needs to start, or a variable needs to be set, or certain things need to be executed in your script. How is that done? How is it done on demand? Well, I think there's things in the creation kit, if I remember correctly. Like I said, it's been a while, where you can start a quest. So you can gate something behind a quest stage that's already running. You can start a quest. I think you can fire off quests that automatically start running the minute the game is started or loaded. There's different events that can trigger, things to be fired off. But the biggest problem with conflicts is a script is basically it's a text file. So you code these functions. So imagine you just take a giant text file, you break it down into chunks, and then, like in this text file, you have a section that reads function 1, function 2, function 3. And then you register, those functions, or however that system works, where you say, I want to register for this event. So then when the game engine generates that event, it says, okay, who's registered for that function? I need to send a message, or if it's put into like a queue, if you want to call it a queue, array list, or however they do it, it registers it registers that function in that script. I believe I'm correct in assuming this. So it registers that function in that script, and then it will fire off that piece of code. Now the script is compiled, so the bytecode is already loaded in memory. If you look in your game save, you do have the scripts. So all it really needs is to access that chunk of the code and pass to that code whatever it's looking for, or allow that code to reference variables that it's looking for. So I think that's kind of like how the system works. Kind of it's complicated, but it's kind of really simple the way it's kind of laid out. But it is complicated in how it works. Okay, so when you have another script that replaces the previous one, the functions that were in the previous one will more than likely not be in the one that replaced it. So those functions are not there. So if an event is, let's say you have a gun, or a certain animation that does something, and a script does that, and then that script is replaced. Well, those events are still firing, but that chunk of code, that compiled code in the PEX file, is no longer available. So it's not going to work. It might say, if there's references on the stack frame that need those events, it might literally say reference no longer exists, or something like that. And that's the problem with overriding scripts. So how do you know? So this whole video was kind of about how can you tell. I can show you what I do here. So I'm going to use this application here to show you what I do to check. And it's the same process whether you're doing it manually or whether you're doing it using a mod manager, it works the same. Okay, so to start out with, there is a load order, and the load order, the way the way that load orders are processed, it differs whether you're dealing with a pre-Fallout game, Fallout 4 game, or whether you're dealing with the Bethesda game from Fallout 4 Creation Engine forward. The older games like Oblivion, if I'm not mistaken, they sort plugins internally by date. It's a date stamp. That's how they know what the newest plugin is. Doesn't matter what your load order is. That's how they know what the newest plugin is. So sometimes the game engine will have a mind of its own. So what you think it's doing or what you believe you've told it to do, it's not necessarily doing. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with custom minis or anything like that, because a lot of those were added using a script extender. The idea kind of was taken, so that way you don't have to change your actual, let's say your Fallout or your your Skyrim or whatever minis. But and so anyways, back on the game engine. So the load order, the game takes plugins in a certain order, and that's how things are overwritten. So you may think that your load order says one thing, but sometimes the game engine then loads things in a particular order, different from what your load order is. It just depends. And I'll talk about some sorting things. And this application does have some basic user configurable sorting parameters, but I'll cover that in like a later video. So this thing isn't massive. This video isn't massive. So there is sorting, and yes, sorting can be based on something as simple as whether a dependent plugin comes after all of its master plugins. That's the most basic thing, but that's not necessarily user defined. Okay, so you have your load order, and these load orders here have what I call resource files. I believe they call them Bethesda Source Archive. I believe BSA, I'm just guessing, but BSA to me, the acronym means Bethesda Source Archive or something. Something like that. And then you have a BA2. But really what these are I call them resource files. They're just they're resource files used by the game. That's what I call them. So when I use the term resource file, that's what I mean. Or a resource archive. I usually mean like a BSA or a BA2. So really all this is just a giant file that can be accessed randomly. Okay, so basically it's a giant file that has a table in it which defines what individual files are in this giant file. And in some archives, it will tell, probably in all archives if I'm thinking about this correctly. I know it does it in like the ones prior to Fallout 4, but it has data such as an index, which tells the order the files are found in. It tells the location, the byte offset into this giant file where this compressed data begins, and then it actually says this is how large the decompressed file is going to be. So everything is there for a person to look at the table data, build their own tables, and be able to extract files from the archive. That's what a lot of these extractors do. Okay, so now you know that the resource archive has a file list in it. So what the game does when it loads things up, it will actually look at this information and say, okay, as it's loading, it's what it's doing. It's building these tables. It's going down through the plugin list, hopefully in the load order, in the exact load order list you have, hopefully in this order, but again, it's not always 100%, because there are certain rules that do apply that is indigenous that's native to the game engine itself. So when it loads these plugins, it looks at the archives, and it's going to say these are the files that this plugin is going to reference. And then if another plugin comes below that, that then references, like let's say another plugin comes below that whose resource archive also has the same script in it. That script is going to be the one the game looks at. Whatever it encounters last, the most recent one, if you want to call it, whatever it encounters last down that list, that is what wins. So that is why you see patches. So if you have a script that has two functions in it, then you have you have the same script again coming from another plugin that has three completely different functions in it. Those two functions are no longer, they don't exist in that second occurrence of that same script. They don't exist. Those two functions doesn't exist. So those functions will not work. So when people patch it, they take both of those scripts and they combine them. So now a patch script now has 5 functions in it. Now that doesn't really account for variables that might get reused. Like let's say you have a global configuration variable that the game uses that there is a conflict for, such as let's say something simple like a timescale. So the first script says I'm going to set, like let's say you have global, or what is it, some GCM, game configuration menu. So let's say you have a GCM, you have the GCM mod. It might set certain variables when it loads up. That's what the script does. But then you have another mod below that, which then turns around and sets that game variable something else. So you're thinking, wow, I set it to this, but now it's being set to this. What caused that? So in a sense, that's where two scripts are accessing a global configuration variable for the game. So that can cause a problem. But let me show you this. So here's the thing. So now we know we have the load order. We have our plugins in a certain order. So now we need to figure out what could be overriding it. So what we want to do is you always hear conflicts. So there's a feature that's built into this, and this is how I check for conflicts. So there's a feature built in that allows me to, and I kind of touched on this in the last video, but what it does is just a function that's built into a pipe. And for those who are kind of interested in coding, the pipe is simply this. So this is the pipe. It's just simply a case statement where there is an opcode, and this opcode here in this case is 1820. And I know this doesn't have to do anything with conflicts. Well, the function does, but I'm going to kind of share more. So you can clearly, I mean, this is what it is. This is how the pipe looks. So a brief kind of glimpse of the code just literally says if you're prompting, let's see what this does. It's a resource report. The parameters are the file name, the resource name you're looking for, and then there's a switch. It's an optional switch you can pass. So literally it says, are you prompting for the resource file? If you are, then I'm going to throw up a form, the form you define in that external file. I'm going to throw that up, and it's going to prompt you for the file you want to look for. And then it's going to exit out. Because remember, forms are multitasking. So this form right here knows that it's that it was called for this function, and you can reuse forms over and over again because they're instanced in a sense. You just can't reuse the same name because they have to have a unique name. So in a sense, that's all this does. That's what this code does right there. That's what that does. It exits out. Now, once you provide input, that form will then call this routine again. It says, okay, routine 1820, opcode 1820 asks for input. And remember, it's multi-threaded, so you're going to have a whole bunch of forms up, and they're all independent of each other. A better term might be independent of each other, as opposed to multi-threaded. They're all independent. And then all I simply do, and this is true of this, again, this is very indicative of the pipe. So this is what this pipe is. So it just adds some simple edits. Do you provide... Did you provide a file name? If not, a file name that I want to look up. If not, there's nothing to look up. So there's no reason to even do anything. So we're going to exit out. However, we want to take a look. We want to look for a resource. And this is how this is again how this front end actually links into all the libraries that do the heavy lifting. So this is a thing that's built into this right here is built into the input system. So this callback is built in over here to the input system, and that is in a library that can be reused. So in a sense, what I'm saying is, if you provided input, data is callback. So I'm actually calling back the opcode that I literally just threw up that little input window for, and I'll show you in just a second. So if I've provided input and I've already processed the data, then I need to show it, and that's what this does. I used to actually have this. I was going to explain this piece of code. I used to have it so that you could call it multiple times, and each time it would give you a unique list. But I put it into a reporting system. Therefore, if the report has to be unique, so it can only run one type of report. So if I need to run two of the same report, then I need to give it a unique name. And I'll explain all that stuff later. And then I basically take a look to see, is there anything, that I find anything? And if not, that's if the list is empty, then there's no reason to even show a resource form. Now here's where the actual coding is done. And like I say, this chunk is actually copied and pasted multiple times, hundreds of times for different functions. So there's the waiting animation. That's what throws the waiting animation up. And and everything kind of has its own. It can kind of try to assume as much as it can. Here's what generates the report. As you can see, it's in an external library. So it's in this library over here. This is where the report is. So the external libraries can literally be used by any application, because again, this is just a front end. So the report that generates this stuff, it is not in this front end. There are some that are, but the majority are. As many as I can put in libraries, I put them in libraries. Okay, and at this point, I define the thread. This is defining a thread that means this is going to run in its own thread. And then I start the worker. And again, workers are managed in over here. There's a class. There's a class for all these things. And each class has a certain set of functions. And that is it. That's completely it. That's all it does. So whenever the report generates what it needs, all I do is throw up a form, and I tell the form, this is the data you need to use to, the form name then goes out to find how the form is defined. It looks that up, and then this variable this field right here says this has the report information in it. And then that's how it knows. So I've got the form name, so I know what the form is going to look like designer-wise. And then this has the data I need to put in that form. And that is true for any form that this program uses. So that's the pipe. That just gives you, that's as simple as I could get it. And it's the same code throughout the whole thing. The only thing that changes is the title of the window I'm throwing back, what I'm asking for. It might ask for like a file or whatever. Data callback. Sometimes I don't need the data that's called back, so I just don't have anything in that section. And then, of course, I need to check to see if it's running. So it can only run, the threads are unique, so it won't run the same thread twice, and that's handled down here in this worker class. And that's how over here in this right here, it knows what threads are running, because this is a report that tells me, looking at the worker class, it's a function in the worker class. So again, this right here is no different than this. It just simply runs, it refreshes itself. Some forms are auto refreshing. You tell it, when you open up this form, I want you to auto refresh, and that's what it does. And it refreshes about once every 5 seconds. So it's not on demand. And then this down here is, again, just to kind of show you, this is also an auto refresh form, but this is a form that you can attach a thread to. So when this form opens, it will start to thread, and then the thread will actually it'll go through the controls or object, and then make adjustments accordingly. And that's what you see going on here. So this is a type of auto refresh or refresh like an auto refresh form, this is a second type. And I wanted to include these two types in case someone was interested in how it worked. They could kind of see how it was done. Now, okay, so that's enough. That's enough of the offshooting. Let's get back to this. So how do I check for a conflict? So there is a function that I have in the code, but the process is true. This is I want to more kind of focus on the process, but there is a function that I built this process around. So the process is checking. So how do I check for a conflict? So I have a function built in called which mod, and I put it over here in the search. This is just where I put it. You can put it wherever you want, but we're going to do it a different way. We're going to go over here to search plugins, I think. Let me think. It's been, okay, yeah. So in search plugins over here, I went ahead and put that change in so it doesn't search archives for plugin files. So as an example, I want to search a plugin for Workshop, just Workshop script. Let's just kind of entertain it. Workshop script. Technically, this is the last four. This is the last list view I clicked on, but we'll talk about it later. Okay, so this is, and I'm going to leave this in the code. This is just again, like I said, like I mentioned in the previous video, it's just a brute force check. It's what I call brute force. It grabbed the plugin, loaded the whole thing as a text string, and then just did a simple text search. So I looked in this text string for Workshop script. And here are the plugins that I found them. Now, I would think that it would be in... Now, Workshop script, remember, doesn't just show Workshop script. It's doing... Workshop script can be TS Workshop script, for example. Like this, because it's got transfer settlements in it. And what I can do is... So there's a plugin that references it. So I'm kind of curious as to what, let's see, do I have this? I don't have this in the menu. Yeah, I do right here. So what I want to do is, okay, so what I've just done, just to kind of show you, I have to double check, is I want to edit this plugin. I want to take a look. I want to look at it. So to me, the most simplest thing for me to do is just to do an edit. The code is not in there to break down a plugin. I break down a plugin. I can parse a plugin's data structure to a certain point, but I had to set the rest on the back burner and move off onto other aspects. But later I can go back to it. So I have to have something that I can look at this plugin with, and what I have is just a hex editor. I use HXD. That's the one I use. So what I want to do is I want to find in here. So what I'm going to do is let's look up Workshop script. Okay, found it. And I'm curious why, what this would be. So if you take a look, it's actually TS Workshop script because it looked for simply the text string Workshop script in that plugin and it found it because Workshop script is part of the file name TS Workshop script. So we know that one's not going to really, I don't really need to concern myself with that one. But you can look up here and you can see that is part of a VMAD chunk. And I think that's virtual machine something. I forget what that one is. So that's, and I'd have to look it up and do a little bit of research on it. But that's part of that, that chunk. So we know that one is, the TS. So we don't, actually, if I wanted to make double sure, what I could do is, let's edit file here. Let's do this again. And let's find Workshop script. What we can do is hit F3. See, it's still TS. See TS right here. Still that one. And that's it. So there's no, and I can't wrap around. I probably have to set search to wrap around. But it only found 2 instances of quote, Workshop script in this plugin that was referenced. And both of them are TS Workshop script. So that's not the one I need to worry about. But this just goes to show you how you can use the brute force. And it's just, like I say, it's so simple. It's just so simple to do. You can read all bytes into a text string, and you just simply do a search. In VB, Visual Basic, it's incredibly simple to do. Okay, so I'm assuming Workshop script is in and this right here should be in the same order that the plugins are in my load order over here, because that's what you want to do. You want to take it in plugin order, or what you believe to be plugin order. So I can see that there's an official patch up here. I know this one here actually has, more than likely Workshop script in it. And then you have Workshop framework, should have Workshop script in it. IDEX station is going to have something with Workshop script, so we know IDEX, so we can take a look at these things. Now, why car variety, I'm not sure. This was the one I'm not completely sure about, and this might cause a problem. I don't know. Again, it's just a complete guess as to what might be causing the problem with the numbers. Let's see. But that's a guess. See, there is a VMAD Workshop script. I have no idea what's being done with it. And that's the only reference. So it's a VMAD. Now, whether that means anything or not, I don't know. I have no idea what VMAD means. But so this is just, again, the brute force. But what we're going to do is, because this is a resource search. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here, and now we need to look. I need to see loose files, and I need to look at archives, because plugins are not found in archives. So what I wanted to show you is sometimes plugins can reference something. You might be able to look by form ID name, like a form name, and you can see what is actually the last plugin in this list that would reference that form. That could be the source of a conflict. That would be like, let's say, a record conflict, or maybe even a script conflict, perhaps. Because I know in the older Bethesda games, the scripts are actually stored in the plugin itself. The compiled script and the source, if it exists, are actually stored in the plugin, whereas once it hits Skyrim, they became external. The compiled scripts became external files, in a sense. They're not in the plugin anymore. They're a file in and of itself. So what I want to do is, let's do a resource file search. I want to look for I think it's Workshop script PEX. Okay. Whoops. That was definitely not intended. Okay. All right. So I thought I fixed that. I guess I didn't. Okay. So let's do this. I know what caused this. This is, no, I did not fix this. Yeah, this was caused by data being returned. Okay, so that was definitely unexpected. Let's fire it off again. Yeah, I'm gonna leave this in the video just so you can show that it does happen. It's not a big deal. It's just part of the process. And you can see what happens when you launch this thing off. But we're gonna do this a different way. And that way, hopefully, we won't have this problem. Okay, so what I want to do, yeah, that was funny. So what I want to do is, I actually thought I fixed like one part of it, but I didn't. Okay, so to give you a quick glimpse of this, I actually with threads, with the worker thread class, I can literally tell other threads to wait. They're running, but I tell them to wait until other threads complete, and that's what you saw happen. I want to make sure the load order's loaded before any other threads load. So we're going to let this spin, but it's multi-threaded, so we can go do our thing. So let's try this differently. I think what I want to do is, I think a resource search is different. So let me try this. Let's try this. Okay. Now, I don't know if this, okay, this is different. Very good. This is different. See up the top, this is the one I wasn't, yeah. See up the top where it says which mods. So this particular form should work just fine. The other was file search. That one needs some work. Okay, so just kind of ignore all that kind of stuff. All right, but it's still running, and it's actually, if you look over here, because again, it's multi-threaded, it's actually loading all of my files, my mod files. So we're just going to let that run in the background. So here you can see, you know, the which mod. So when it came to community fixes, again, you can see the one I have installed, and this is the new one. This is the new version that I have not installed yet. And to install this, to really install this, I didn't get to show this in the last video, but if I really want to install this, because remember I was saying I could schedule these. So every time a new mod comes out, I literally can make sure I'm pointing to the new mod, but the new mod is not installed. And we knew that because when we looked at active not installed. Let's go over here and take a look at this. Active not installed. And we can clearly see over here that it's active not installed. So what I can do is I can go over here. God, I actually update. I finally got the tabs to work, so I got some new code in. So let's just hope this works. So what I want to do is I want to find the mod, and here's the mod. Now again,
let's get to modding.
We reran this, so you know this no longer is at the bottom, because what shows at the bottom are recent mods. The actual header. If you were to look at the header up here, there's a header up here. What's going to be like, this is a header here. It would say recent mods. You can see that this is, it took me right to the mod, and all I have to do is go over here and then just do whatever installs. So it can be, you know, I can still do a check if I want to. You know, if I want to go over here and do like a check install, I can still do that. And you know, there's again, see, if you remember from the previous video, these are the ones that have changed that I haven't installed yet. So I can still do all that. That's how I can access that. All right, so anyways, back to this. So let's close this. We don't need that. Let's bring this over here because we don't need that. And all these forms are independent. Again, it's the framework. There's a form class, and there's a bunch of methods that are for each particular class. And I'll have all that later. I'll have the documentation that shows all that kind of stuff later. All right, so anyways, back onto this. So we're talking about conflicts. So what I want to do is I'm going to look for workshop framework. Workshop script, PEX. And here we go. So what it's doing now, well, I actually put the check in here so that if it's like a BSA or a plugin, it doesn't look through the archive, because those are not going to be found in Bethesda archive files, resource archives. But a PEX would. So that's what it's doing. What it's doing is it's scanning this load order. It's opening up any archive associated with this load order in this sequence. And then it's looking for the reference workshop framework. And here you can see where it found it. Again, we're going to ignore where it says TS because this is not workshop script. However, you can see this is the one we're looking for, workshop script. This is the one where a lot of people have problems with. You can see up here that it was first found in Fallout 4 Miscellaneous. That's the first instance where it was found. And that file is being overwritten by something else. And then you can see the other instances of a name that has workshop script. And I didn't really look for a specific, I could look for a specific name, but I wanted to provide a search pattern, and you can do search patterns in a couple ways. You can use a wildcard. I'll show you that in a minute. But you can see where you can see each occurrence of workshop script. And this way, you can literally look up workshop script PEX, and it will show you every occurrence of any file name that is included in an archive file that has that text in it, that particular substring, if you want to call it, of the file name. But what we're mostly interested in is workshop script. So here you can see the first instance. I'm going to Z this out here. Let's do a Z. And again, Z is externally configured. There's a function in the pipe that clears, it actually clears any marked entries in whatever current list you're in, whatever the current list is. This is the current list view, so that's what it does. And I just do a Control Z and all that, but we'll talk about stuff later. So anyways, here's workshop script. That's the very first occurrence. The next occurrence happens with unofficial patch. And as you can see, it's being overwritten. This is the next occurrence. The last occurrence, which is the one that wins, is the one from Workshop Framework. The rest of these are unique scripts unto themselves, and they are the last of their kind, so to speak. That's the last on the list. So that's how you can see the order, because this order is taken from the plugin list, which is your load order. In this application, what happens is the load order is saved. The way that I kind of call it, there's an input issue here. The way that I call it is, let's see here. So I can save as live. That's what I call the live. It's the live load order, what the game actually uses. And you can see that if there was a difference, it would have popped up and it would have said load order has changed. It didn't, so we're good. Nothing has changed. But that's what I do. So when I run the game, that's part of when the game runs. It takes whatever your load order is, and that becomes live. So that live load order is the order in which these plugins are taken, and therefore you can see the path of Workshop script through this load order. So you can see the order in which they occur and which one actually wins. So in this case, Workshop Framework would win. Therefore, Workshop Framework would, that everything should work as it's supposed to. And if you notice, the unofficial patch comes first, and I do believe that Workshop Framework actually carries over any changes from the unofficial patch. So that's kind of like how that works. That's what you would call, so in a sense, Workshop Framework would be a merge of the unofficial patch and whatever functions Workshop Framework has. So therefore, that particular version of Workshop Framework would work for both. Now, I can't tell you what would happen if you use Workshop Framework and you don't have the unofficial patch installed. I don't think it would be anything detrimental, but again, it does patch it, so it carries over changes, so I'm assuming the changes will be there, even though, at least in the script, the changes will be there even if you don't have the unofficial patch. That would be my guess. Okay, so that's kind of that. Now, you can do it this way. I just wanted to show you can do it this way. So we can use a wildcard. Let's see, did I get that? Where is that? I gotta lean up on my keyboard to see where it is. God, I've been typing for so many years and I still can't even remember where it is. I don't really remember keys. Alright, so this technically, okay, again, I put this code in yesterday. I didn't fix the other one yet. That one is a completely different issue. But this one here is hopefully we'll use this wildcard appropriately. So by using the wildcard, you can now see any occurrence of Workshop and then a wildcard and then PEX. And again, this is taken in the order of the load order, and this is how you can use wildcard searches. So if you don't know what, let's see, yeah, see, it lists these are the individual, they're different scripts. So, and it tells you where they start from. This can kind of be confusing, but at least you can actually do a wildcard search to see which one you're looking for. And then the next video, I'm going to show how we can use. I know Champolion. I've used it a long time ago, and I remember it's great you mentioned that. Yeah, because I didn't even think of that at the time, but I did have it before. I've used it years ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to set that up as a quote show command. It's real simple to do, and it works for if it works for all PEXs, we should be good. But now when it comes to scripts that are found inside of Oblivion, those have to be extracted. Now that code's not in here yet. I don't have that code in here. So, but everything's going to be there to support it, and then it'll just be a function call. The function call is empty, and then all I have to do is put the code in there for the function call, and then it should be good to go. Everything should work in the flow of things. But that's kind of like how you can check for, how you can actually check for conflicts. So it shows how mod managers generally check for conflicts. That's how I use this app to check for conflicts. And it's how you can manually check for conflicts. and that's the order, and you take it in as the load order. There is a conflict function in here, and I do have it's. I'll show that in a later video because this video is going to be already fairly long. But you can it does have its own conflict, and conflicts can be used creatively, not only to pick out which file you might want to use, but also whether it's the first, whether where it occurs in the list. So as an example, just to give you a quick heads up, over in the manifest. So if we're over here in this manifest, and let's say you want to uninstall, let's say I want to uninstall this mod. See right here, let's say I want to uninstall this mod right here. If this mod has a file that is replaced by another file, it's just going to skip it because it can't remove a file that doesn't belong to itself. And that's how I can kind of check. Also, what this type of system gives me the ability to do is to restore a file. You can roll back. There's rollback functions built in. It needs to be debugged, but it is in the pipe. It is in the structure. So you can roll back. So I could literally go in and roll back to a particular mod because I know what files are installed, so I can either remove the files if they're unique, or I roll back to the previous version. There is a very simple one-click rollback option. But again, that's for a completely separate video, but that does give you a heads up. Oh, and for those that are just curious and like to program, the problem with this tab was I reused a variable I shouldn't use. In the application, there's a dictionary, and a dictionary it stores data by tab name. And there is a variable in a structure that is stored in that dictionary, and it has information about each tab. One of those variables was the index, and I used the index to assign numbers to recent files. So whenever I add a mod, and like I say, you can drag and drop. You literally can drag and drop files over here. These are so small, but you can drag and drop You can drag and drop, folders over here, and it'll add it to your thing. I even put in here to where it'll upload it. So if you've referenced a remote server and you happen to drag and drop in that chunk, then it's going to upload that to the remote server. I did put that in here. But yeah, that's that. It's like I say, it's pretty simple stuff. It's not really super complicated. All right, well, I'm going to cut this video short. I just wanted to kind of talk about conflicts and how you can use things like hex editor, or a hex editor. I use HXD. Anything that lets you look at binary files and do string searches. You could write your own application to do that. How I simply used a brute search. I didn't even have to know how to parse a plugin. Don't care. I just know it's got a string in it. That's what I'm looking for. Now, if that string is compressed, or if, let's grab this real quick. If that, oh God, this is like the mouse is, you know what? I'm just going to leave it like that. If the string is compressed, it's not going to find that because I don't look for compressed data and then magically try to decompress it. I'm not trying to grain it that deep. But this way you can literally look for things that might be causing a problem. And that's one of the features I wanted to eventually get to, is a database, and it's going to be massive. And when I mean massive, I can't even envision how many gigabytes this database is going to be. I can't even envision it. But literally, the idea I wanted was, or the idea I thought about many years ago before I even started doing all this, was what if I had a database that I could link things to a particular mod. Then I could literally say, like for example, let's say I make a script. I can literally put in the documentation of the script, these are the functions, or I can pull them out myself. I can use, if I have the source, I can pull them out, or if I have, there's Champollion, if it lets me save the script, I can pull them out. Something that lets me pull out the source of the script where I can build a database of functions. So somebody says, oh, this is the form ID. If you have this, and you can check, you can actually look in the plugin to check, because Xedit does. Now, eventually, when I get the plugin library completed, it will do the same. You'll be able to do it using that, and that would probably be the best way to do it. But for now, you can do it this way using just a simple brute force. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. This is probably already gone in like 20, 30 minutes, if not more. And because there's, like I say, there is a lot to show, but I really wanted to focus on conflicts and how and where they can occur, and load orders and how those apply, and things like that. So I hope that helps. And the next one I do, I will show using Champollion.